This program was first broadcast on Canterbury's access media station, Plains FM, and was made with the assistance of New Zealand On Air.
It's time for Emergence News on Plains FM 96.9, citizen-made radio.
Kia ora, and welcome to Emergence News, a program dedicated to news and information surrounding the emergence of Maitreya and the Masters of Wisdom. This program comes from the Plains FM studios in Christchurch, Aotearoa, New Zealand. Today's program is dedicated to an in-depth study of the book titled The Laws of Life by Benjamin Creme, published in 2005. The Laws of Life, Maitreya's Teachings. It's essential reading if you are interested in the revelations and understandings of Maitreya's teachings. Maitreya's Teachings, The Laws of Life, is the 11th in a series of books written or compiled by British artist and esotericist Benjamin Creme. It represents the most contemporary phase of teachings at that time, given by Maitreya, head of the group of enlightened teachers known as the Masters of Wisdom, our elder brothers and the custodians of the evolutionary plan for humanity. Maitreya gave his teachings to a group of swamis in his community in London between 1988 and 1993. However, some of the teachings might have been revealed before that. Benjamin Creme compiled these teachings from an associate of Maitreya's and organised the material into subject headings. Subjects such as freedom, liberty and salvation, crime and violence, market forces, politics and religion, third world debt, changes sweeping through the world, the science of light, and life after death. There are others, but gosh, that whets the appetite, doesn't it?
That will do for a while.
Absolutely. Joining me today in the studio are Share International volunteers Peter and Shafir. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nigel.
And Peter, which subject amongst those mouth-watering subjects, which one are you focusing on today?
Yes, on chapters 3 and 4, the first one, freedom, and the second one is understanding energies, which is something that we need to focus on in today's climate.
And Shafir, what chapter or chapters are you looking at?
So I was going to look at the chapter on historical perspectives, where Maitreya gives more predictions about what's the sort of consequences of some of the decisions that were taken in that period and how it affects people.
Ngā mihi. Author Benjamin Creme says few could read these pages without being changed. That's quite a profound statement, isn't it?
It is.
So I thought before we move on to Peter, I would refer to a book reviewer, author. She's an expert on British literature. She's a translator and an editor of a number of publications. She's based in Spain, and her name is Carmen Font. And she describes this book, The Laws of Life by Benjamin Creme. And I quote, "All the teachings presented in this book originated from Maitreya the World Teacher, assembled in thematic chapters. The two great laws of life, namely the law of rebirth and the law of cause and effect, are apparent both in the big picture and in the small details. From politics to genetic engineering, or from earthquakes to temptation. The range is enormous and adds up to a deeper and greater understanding of the inner currents of life. The Laws of Life is not a glossary of terms. It offers capsules of new meaning that allow the reader to connect the dots and fill in the gaps. She continues to say, every page seems to radiate further meaning when you see correspondences and relationships within a myriad of small items. Very often we are struck by a hidden treasure, such as the art of evolution when applied to political essentials. Everything evolves in its own rhythm, and the so-called political, social and spiritual leaders must learn the art of evolution. If you talk about freedom, then you must learn what freedom is. At a time when freedom has become almost a slogan for many politicians, it is refreshing to read that for Maitreya, freedom is interdependence. This is part of the art of politics, explains Maitreya, which he defines as the art of reconciliation, while respecting diversity. Politicians and citizens must learn to recognise and defend the sacredness of their nation. As an individual must learn to protect his or her body from physical, emotional and mental damage stemming from attachment. In Chapter 5, Maitreya provides nuggets of historical significance, since history is made up of the unfolding of events and the precipitation of causes on the physical plane. There is much to be learned from the patterns of the past. And that's not the whole review, that's just a part of her review. She really did get a lot out of reading that book, didn't she?
She did, yes.
So as you see, if those subjects appeal, then settle in and enjoy, because Peter and Shafir follow me shortly. You will enjoy the subject material as we open the book on the laws of life. Welcome back to Emergence News, and now it is time to hand the program over to Peter, and it's all yours.
Thanks very much, Nigel. Great.
Yes, indeed.
Yes, Maitreya's influence is seen in this book of Benjamin Creme, The Laws of Life. Indeed, he overshadowed Ben to bring us 140 messages that were recorded for posterity. We use these messages as part of our meditation. And it's great to see and to feel the energy that comes through from Maitreya. In Ben's book, The Laws of Life, he talks about real freedom and says it is not outside, but is within you. When you experience freedom from mind, spirit and body, that is from the conditioning, you realise that you are the eternal spark of the Supreme Creator. Each and everything around you, within you, belongs to the Almighty. It cannot be gained or lost. It is indivisible. It belongs to one and all. If freedom becomes stagnant, then the process becomes one of involution, and you experience all the processes of involution. If freedom flourishes, you experience evolution. You are born to be free. The only constitution, freedom and salvation are the common heritage of one and all, through honesty of mind, sincerity of spirit, and detachment. There is no constitution other than this. The time has come for every individual and nation to accept that the only constitution is to revere the will of the Creator. Constitutions which have been tampered with for the benefit of the few, while the people remain enslaved, cannot survive. The will of the Lord will be common to all countries and be reflecting the will of the people. And this is what we will see in the coming time, isn't it?
Yes.
That the will of the people will be reflected, and this will be in line with the spiritual nature of each and every one of us.
So what you're saying is that freedom is for each human being their birthright.
Yes, it is. And but it's all part of the one whole. We're all part of humanity, and it's the separation that causes the problems, as we've covered before.
We think we're separate.
Yes.
But in fact we are part of it.
Yeah, we're part of one oversoul, and each one of us is a soul in incarnation. And so we have to learn this, practicing the art of living with a strong sense of detachment. In other words, we see things and we don't get involved with them in emotions and in our mental space at all. Peace is free from cause and effect. Many politicians think peace is due to nuclear weapons. They are gravely mistaken, says Maitreya. The so-called peace that politicians are talking about is nothing but fear. Mm-hmm. They have translated fear into peace.
That's right, yeah.
And we can see that, and yet we still have all these atomic weapons sort of lurking in the background, if you might say. Mm-hmm. Peace is free from cause and effect. This is a new understanding and is dawning on the younger generation now. And I think we can see this in many cases.
That's right, yeah.
Peace is free from the isms, whether it's communism or socialism or capitalism. Mm-hmm. Peace is actually free from these. It's free of oppositions between East and West and North and South. It belongs to all of humanity. And we'll look too at the energies in chapter 4. And the incoming energies is bringing an awareness and equilibrium simultaneously. Not only people, but also nature will respond constructively.
Can I ask you a question there, Peter? When you're talking about the incoming energies, are you talking about the fact that we've got the Aquarian energy pouring into the planet now?
Exactly. And of course, we have Maitreya bringing in this tremendous energy of love, which is, he's being overshadowed by two great beings who are stimulating this energy of love, isn't it? I mean, one of them has 12 levels of cosmic consciousness.
It's the avatar of equilibrium.
Yes, synthesis and peace, yes. And this tremendous love is just something that we don't really, we think of it in an emotional sense, but it is well beyond that. It's all the energy of life, in actual fact.
So the promise is that with this energy of equilibrium and love is that these great avatars will help to create as much peace and joy and love as we're experiencing conflict on Earth.
That's right. It's
it'll tip.
Yeah, change it, won't
it?
Change it around completely.
Mm. And these energies that are pouring in are contributing to the rapid sweeping changes throughout the world.
This is right, yes.
That we're currently experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, at the moment, we're getting a lot of mud stirred up from the the negative aspects of our life here. Mm-hmm. And everything that offers, we're talking about the new energy that's bringing it in, and from now on, anything which operates by imposition of force will not survive. And so you look at what's happened in Afghanistan, and you can see that force didn't actually work, did it? Americans thought they could import democracy to Afghanistan, but no, I don't think so. They've got their own way, and rightfully so.
Their own culture.
Oh, their own culture.
And this is what Maitreya says, is it's really important that everybody has their own culture and their own way of doing things, and we respect that. Yeah.
Respect the sacredness of your own nation.
Yeah.
Yes, and all right, they've got problems, just as we've had problems with so-called democracy. They've got problems with their form of law and government, but they've got to work it out themselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
This book of Law of Life was released in 2005, as Nigel said, and shows that humanity is slow to learn. Destructive thoughts of humanity affect the very nature that we are part of. First will come fire, then huge downpours of rain, then landslides, and the inevitable final outcome is earthquakes. Have we seen that in the last 2 weeks?
Have we seen it in the last
8 or 9, 10 years?
Yes, but I mean...
But it's on a daily basis now, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. And so these are due to, it's not, they're not acts of God. These are
consequences.
Acts of humanity, thinking the way it is. Energy must be respected with detachment so that it can flow fluidly in mind, spirit and body. People will become aware that the so-called acts of God are really results of man's inhumanity to man. The greed of those in power has condemned their fellows and nature itself. Market forces have created social and natural havoc. People have been condemned to death, literally, in the name of profit and loss. Hospitals have been shut because they are not profitable. I see in America there are over 70-odd hospitals closed, in the last few years. And, of course, they're worried about not being able to cope with the pandemic and that sort of thing,
Isn't it remarkable? I know it's been said before, but it's truly remarkable that the most wealthy country, the most wealthy nation on our planet, has one of the most broken health systems.
Oh, no.
Yes.
It's just sort of hard to figure, actually, I mean, I guess they'll wake up sometime, but yes, well, schools have had difficulty in staying open in some places, in some countries as well. But these institutions are obviously essential for the health and well-being of society. The world has been polluted with ideologies, says Maitreya. If the human race does not follow the path of justice, peace and happiness and grace, then nature will explode with all sorts of disasters. Remember, honesty of mind, sincerity of spirit, and detachment are the way through to enlightenment. This is the Emergence News on Plains FM. For more information, go to shareinternational.org.
This is Emergence News, and we're reflecting on the book by Benjamin Creme, The Laws of Life. I've shared 2 quotes so far. Now I've got a third one. It's a quote from the publisher themselves on this book, and they say, "Above all, Maitreya teaches the art of self-realization. 3 practices are at the core of this discipline: honesty of mind, sincerity of spirit, and detachment. Practice these 3, he says, and come to self-realization," which is God realization.
It is.
It has nothing to do with religion, nothing to do with politics. It has nothing to do with any form of ideology. Anyone at any stage can learn the art of self-realization and find he or she will enjoy life. Life is to be enjoyed with detachment. And on that note, Shafia, welcome to the program.
Thank
it is
you.
your turn to talk to us about the laws of life, and you're going to be looking at it from a historical perspective.
Yes, I am. And this is one of the chapters, which is worth a little study because it gives some background information that we now know is true and shows how Maitreya was able to see the inevitable consequences of actions taken by politicians and leaders around the world. So pertinent to today's American withdrawal from Afghanistan, where we see, the consequences of going into a country when you're not really welcome. Yes. The associate was talking about the United Nations, and this has been going on throughout the Middle East, for the last few decades, not just in Afghanistan, but in Iraq and Kuwait and other places as well. It's been a sort of a place where the West has gone in and tried to make changes. And this is what the associate Maitreya says about the United Nations. The Benjamin Creme had often talked about how the United Nations is the basis for the ruling body in the coming future. And while he says there will be much more autonomy for local groups and community governance, we will need global governments to manage global affairs. Unfortunately, while the Security Council, consisting of the more powerful nations, has allowed greater influence and the veto, the UN will not be able to fulfill its true purpose. So here's what Maitreya says. The UN resolution to sanction military action against Iraq has been brought about by politicians whose self-interest and ambitions are creating chaos and confusion instead of peace. Their actions will be self-destructive. The UN has been converted into a political football game. The only reason they are there is one reason alone, and that is for the oil, which is what we know, don't we? This is what I think people are beginning to realise. So the associate also talks a little bit about the Gulf conflict, and he says the world's politicians and leaders, including Saddam, have been whipping up the emotions of their people to follow and support them onto the battlefield of Kuwait. But when that conflict ends, the people will realise the chaos and suffering this warmongering has created, and deep disillusion will set in. Once this happens, there'll be no hiding place for these politicians from the anger of the ordinary people. They will want to know why they have been lied to and misled into such destruction. And I think this is going to resurface now, isn't it, when we see the terrible scenes that are coming out of Afghanistan, and people are, have been going on for years about how they should be charged with war crimes. And he goes on to say, meanwhile, the world has experienced extremes of weather as a direct result of the violence taking place in the Gulf. The atmosphere is going haywire over the deserts of this region, and we shall see extremes of heat and cold with very wet and windy climatic conditions. So this was in February 1991, and it's just getting more and more intense.
Quite prophetic.
Yes, he was,
And accurate.
And accurate, and it's still going on. So we really need to wake up, don't we? And he talks also about, what happens with the soldiers as well. And he says, given the large quantity of arms and ammunition amassed in Saudi Arabia, the soldiers are training day and night. The minds of the soldiers are at war, and their physical bodies are moving with the mind. Maitreya asks, the day war does not take place and the armies are sent home, do you think all the soldiers will return home in a sane state? Some men will go berserk, fall prey to criminal mentality, and they will find themselves killing and shooting people in the street. Having fought under orders, they often fall prey to depression and other mental effects when they return home. They are changed by the karmic effects of actions in battle.
Changed, and I would use another word, damaged.
Damaged, and we see this, don't we? This is really in the news quite frequently about the mental condition of veterans and how many of them are homeless. They can't keep a job down, and so another consequence of what has been happening.
And it was a very obvious example was after the Vietnam War and a lot of the American soldiers going home, and they could not make the adjustment.
No.
Many could not make the adjustment.
They'd seen too many horrors.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, and this interested me because he said, talked about Iraq and Iran, and he said, despite the fact that this war has dragged on for 7 years with apparently no end in sight, a compromise will be reached between these two countries. There are spiritual leaders in Iran who are beginning to seek solutions that will lead ultimately to a less harsh religious climate and to peace being restored. But nothing was said about what happened afterwards, so I looked it up, and apparently today Iraq and Iran are very close allies and trading partners, and also, unitedly working against the terrorism that's happening in the Middle East. And, so it shows that if we leave them alone, they'll get on and just do what needs to be done.
So as neighbours, there's been some healing, Peter.
Yes.
Oh, I think so.
Yes.
Definitely.
Yeah.
In fact, Sunni and Shiite, I think the powers that be are trying to stir up, a fight between those. And there's not so much difference between the two. In actual fact, there is room for them to come to compromise.
Yes.
And they don't need other parties trying to stir it up.
Yeah. And so hopefully, one of the silver linings of the withdrawal from Afghanistan will be that actually they're a family, an Arab family together, aren't they? And maybe they'll be able to sort their own problems out. Hopefully we can see that.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. And during this time, there were many hostages taken, and Maitreya was clear all the time that the hostages would be safe. And I particularly was in the UK. Do you remember Terry Waite?
Yes. He was captured there for about 4 years or something.
Nearly 5 years.
5 years,
But a year after he was captured, Maitreya said that he would be free and he would be safe. And of course, 5 years goes on. And a lot of Share International people were actually sort of saying, well, is Maitreya making the right thing? Should the associates say this because, it's not happened? But, what Maitreya says is that actually he can't predict
the exact time
because it really depends on humanity's reaction to this. And so I think the Americans bombed a war carrier over there, and that sort of delayed it. But 5 years later, Terry Waite was released. Yeah. So Maitreya also makes a prediction about the President Bush, the older Bush one. And he says the president knows his names are numbered and is using the UN in the Gulf crisis to win popularity. A Democrat will become the next president of America. He said that in November 1990. And he goes on to talk about President G.H. Bush. Despite his so-called victory in Iraq, the president realizes that at home he's failed to solve the massive social and economical problems of America. With another election coming into sight, he will try to divert the American public's attention. But it didn't work, and Bill Clinton became the next president as a Democrat. So another one of his predictions that came true. And there's so many if you go through the whole of that chapter.
Well, that's what makes this book, The Laws of Life, an interesting read, because it's focusing on history from basically the 90s and early 2000s.
Yes.
So it's really interesting to see what happened.
Yes.
Because we all remember.
Yes, that's right.
And he predicted the fall of the Berlin Wall.
The Berlin Wall.
And
also the Margaret Thatcher, you know, he said that the poll tax that she tried to introduce, that would bring her downfall. And she was at the height of her powers at that time, intending to go on. And she was brought down, and he predicted that way before it happened. So,
yeah, it's a great read.
Yeah. So Maitreya has given us many sort of proof and indication of his presence. But what he says at the end of this book, he says about coming out into the world, I will choose my moment. It is difficult for people to understand that although Maitreya is among us, no one can deliver Maitreya. Maitreya himself says, without disturbing anybody, I will choose my moment.